It's officially April, and that means one thing. It's NFL Draft Month. However, there's a lingering question among Nebraska fans. Will any Husker players hear their name called and be selected? In today's video, we're going to answer that question. We're going to go over every single Nebraska player in the draft, read scouting reports by NFL experts, and then make our own predictions to who will be drafted and where. But real quick, if you like the content, please hit like button on this video. It's completely free and it helps me out, along with subscribing to the channel if you don't want to miss out on the best Nebraska football and Nebraska recruiting content on YouTube. We're making videos almost every single day here on the Wilson Sports Channel, so if you don't want to miss out on any of that, please hit that button. But let's just jump right into it, talking about Nebraska and some Huskers trying to turn pros. And it's been a tough couple months for the Huskers. Nebraska made headlines by having 0 players invited to the NFL Combine, only one of 2 Big Ten schools to have that mark. And although this is not the strongest class when it comes to Nebraska, there's a lot of talented players who are entering their name who like to hear their names called. So let's just start it off with arguably the most productive Husker who's Reimer, longtime starting linebacker for this black shirt defense, a guy who was not invited to the Combine, but his stats definitely back up his performance to take that jump to the next level. And when you look at his scouting report, what these NFL scouts, NFL GMs are looking at, again, he's very productive. He's a great tackler, really good pursuit, more of that traditional box linebacker who's going to be a sure tackled guy. But really, the stuff that doesn't blow you away is the fact that he's not super fast. He's not super twitchy. He's not an athletic freak. He's not the greatest in pass coverage. And really, he didn't make that many big game-changing plays that these NFL GMs are looking for from a next-level linebacker. And I always, when I'm talking about linebackers, I go back to the story about Patty Fisher. Now, you might be familiar with Patty Fisher. He was the most productive linebacker in college football. He played for Northwestern a couple years ago. He entered his name to the NFL draft, and he went undrafted. He was the most productive linebacker, and he went undrafted. It's because a lot of these positions, whether it's linebacker, wide receiver, running back, they look for traits. Production's one thing. That's good to have. But if you don't have any of these traits, these impressive physical traits, you're not going to get selected, at least not selected high. So Luke Reimer, unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot of great traits to his name, but the fact that he's super productive, the fact that he was such a great player for Nebraska for a long time, he's definitely going to get a nod. But for that reason, I think he does go undrafted, but he absolutely will get picked up in undrafted free agency. So that's my prediction there for Luke Reimer. Let's stick it with the defense. A lot of good black shirts entering the draft. Let's go over to the secondary, talking about Quinton Newsome, longtime starter in the secondary, cornerback. And when you look at him, pretty good measurables, listed about 6'1", good size, good frame. And this is a guy who I largely consider to be robbed of an NFL Combine invite. He was one of the more productive players for the Huskers the last couple decades. And we're talking about a Nebraska secondary that has constantly churned out really, really good pros. Cam Taylor-Britt, to name a couple. Lamar Jackson's a guy who's been in the league last couple of years, been bouncing around, but he's been really solid. DiCaprio Boodle. So we've continued to produce out pretty solid NFL secondary members. Quinton Newsome might just be the best of the bunch, maybe besides Cam. And did not get an offer to that Combine. Now, when we talk about what he brings to the table, really good numbers. He's an honorable mention for All Big Ten twice. He had a little bit of a decline last year, but again, really good in 2022, really good in 2023. More of a press cover type of cornerback. But when you talk about the things that he maybe needs to work on, it's the fact that he's not the fastest in the world. Yeah, he has a good frame, but he ran a 40 time at his pro day in the 4.5s. In modern day NFL, you're looking for about a 4.4. That's kind of the bare minimum. He plays the receiver instead of the ball. He has too many penalties because of that. And really, like we were talking about with Luke Reimer, he doesn't have a bunch of high-end physical traits. He's not super twitchy. He's not a ball hawk. He doesn't have too many interceptions to his name. Those are all the things that NFL GMs are looking for. But here's the positives. The fact that he has great production. He was a leader for Nebraska time and time again. He basically bet on himself, came back for an extra year, did really well. So those are all things to be excited about when it comes to Quinton Newsome. I think he's being slept on, and I think production is going to speak volumes. For that reason, I do think he gets drafted in the 7th round. So Quinton Newsome, first Husker that I predict to be drafted, but let's keep the train rolling. Let's go to a guy who a lot of people are really projecting to get a lot of national interest, and this is Omar Brown. Another guy who was robbed of an invite. He played great at the Shrine Bowl, which he was a part of, and he got a lot of national interest, like I just mentioned. A lot of these NFL scouts, people on Twitter specifically, they loved Omar Brown. I believe he was a defensive MVP in that Shrine Bowl game, and the outrage ensued when he did not get an invite to the NFL Combine. Now, PFF, Pro Football Focus, has him listed about the 200th best player in the NFL Draft, which is projecting around a 6th, 7th round grade. And really, when you look at the great traits about Omar Brown, he's a little bit undersized, but he has great footwork and explosiveness, really disruptive hands. We've seen time and time again with Omar Brown that he got to the football and disrupted the pass and made that football drop to the ground. He's a really good tackler. He can play anywhere on the defense, whether that's safety, cornerback, free safety, strong safety. He can play in the box. So that's what you get with Omar Brown. Now, again, as for the limited stuff that's not too great, again, not fast, not twitchy. Really, he only had one good year for Nebraska. Obviously, he was a transfer from Northern Iowa and didn't do much last year. And then, of course, in 2023, blew up and was arguably our best player on defense. So, That's a little bit of a concern, specifically the fact that he's a fifth-year player as well. He's a little bit older. He's about 23, 24, I believe. So NFL scouts do take that into account. But hype matters, man. He's getting so much hype nationally. People are thinking this dude is a complete sleeper. For that reason, I believe Omar Brown will be a 6th rounder for the Cornhuskers. So 2 members of the secondary coming off the board for Nebraska. Now let's go to the offense side of the football. We're going to be talking about Marcus Washington. Really gifted player right off the bat. We saw it with Nebraska. He was a transfer from Texas. Very gifted. Arguably probably the best route runner on the team when it comes to that wideout position. However, just off and on production. I was super high on him in 2022. I said, honestly, there were games where he outplayed Trey Palmer. We talk about how good Palmer was as a prospect. There were games that Marcus Washington played better in him, and he outperformed him. Now, we just did not get that on a consistent basis. There were games where he absolutely disappeared. Another thing to notice about Marcus Washington, he's a super good blocker, very physical. Again, he can play that wide receiver X. He can play that Z, so he's pretty dynamic in that regard. But again, he's had a little bit of injury problem. He's been inconsistent, and the production has not blown you away. That's a position that you really want to see production. You want to see, 600, 700, 800 yards. There's a lot of good players who have a lot of production and go undrafted. The fact that he does not have that to his name is not great when it comes to his regards being drafted. And really, there's nothing that drops your jaw when you're looking at Marcus Washington. Yeah, he's a productive wide receiver. He does things fine, but nothing about him is super special. For that reason, I think he goes undrafted. Again, the production is just not good enough. Again, to put this into perspective, Samori Toure had an 1,000-yard season with Nebraska a couple years ago and was barely drafted in the 7th round. Marcus Washington's a good receiver, but it's very hard to cut it in the league. So I believe he's undrafted. I think he'll get an opportunity as an undrafted free agent, but we'll see where that goes. Let's take it to the specialists here real quick. We have 2 specialists entering the NFL draft, Timmy Bleekrode and Marcus Ortiz. Now, I'm not going to talk about Timmy Bleekrode. He's not going to be drafted. I'm sorry, he just wasn't that great for Nebraska. But let's talk about Marco Ortiz. So if you're not familiar with Marco Ortiz, I don't expect you to be. He was our starting long snapper last year, transferred from Florida. And he was actually one of the best long snappers in the country. He won a couple awards, was a semifinalist in the National Long Snapper Award. So I'm not going to lie. I do not know anything about long snappers and, what makes a player really good and really bad. I can distinguish, it was a good snap. It made it to the holder's hands, but Marco Ortiz was one of the better long snappers this year, and he was actually invited to the NFL Specialist Combine, which isn't the real combine, but basically the real deal for specialists. So that was definitely a good sign for him. And the fact that he was one of the better long snappers in the country, I actually think Marco Ortiz will be drafted for Nebraska. Nobody's talking about him. That's one of those takes where if he gets drafted, you come here to Wilson Sports Channel, because I told you that. But Marco Ortiz, I think he's going to be drafted. I have a 6th, 7th round grade on him. That's usually when long snappers go. I believe him to be one of the best and probably one of the first off the board. So expect 6th or 7th round from Marco Ortiz. But he's the guy who's actually, I feel very confident about him being an NFL player, NFL starter. Very confident about Marco Ortiz. So keep an eye on him. So those 5 players, again, Marcus Washington, Marco Ortiz, Quinton Newsome, Omar Brown, and Reimer are the 5 I believe to have a chance those players have a chance to get drafted. Let's go over some players real quick that I do not think have a chance, unfortunately. Number one, Billy Kemp. Again, just so many injuries in his career, wasn't productive enough. Mark Schwashin outplayed him, so that's number one. Norton Newelly's another guy where, honestly, really, really solid guard. Nothing blows you away about Norton Newelly. The substance problem where he got suspended for a year is definitely a major red flag, and unfortunately will kill probably any chance he had of being drafted. Phelan Sanford is a guy that Matt Rhule's hyping up at his pro day. I love Phelan Sanford. Again, his whole story about being, I believe, a hog farmer. He was a walk-on. He was actually a really good member of the secondary. He proved me wrong in a lot of aspects. Unfortunately, yeah, he's not an NFL guy. Hopefully he gets an opportunity, but he's one of those players that has a bright future outside of football. It's no problem. Anthony Grant, undrafted. Again, just nothing blows you away about Anthony Grant. He has a little bit of character issues as well. Again, this is a really good running back draft class. I don't think Anthony Grant will get an opportunity. We'll see if he gets an opportunity, maybe in another football league, like the USFL, like the Canadian Football League. We've seen Derek Mills, if you remember him. He's had some good opportunities in other leagues, so maybe Anthony Grant gets the opportunity. And last but not least, Joshua Fleeks, transfer from Baylor, one-year player for us, wide receiver. I mean, he was decent, barely played really, except at the end of the year with, again, the Iowa-Wisconsin game. But, yeah, no chance for Josh Fleeks. Again, thank you for your contributions. But, yeah, probably does not have a chance of being drafted or getting an opportunity even in the undrafted free agent market. So those are the players that I think will be drafted. So, yes, there will be a Nebraska Cornhusker drafted in the 2024 NFL Draft. Don't worry about it. Now, there's not going to be a super prolific player in the first couple rounds. Again, we've had a lot of success actually in the NFL Draft the last couple of years. We saw Cam Taylor-Britt go in the second round. Cam Jurgens go in the second round. I believe Trey Palmer went in the fourth round, I believe, maybe even third round. So we've actually had a lot of success the last couple of years. We're not going to have that this year. That's what you'd expect given the fact that Matt Rhule was only here for 1 year, only got his hands on these guys for a brief amount of time. But again, we're going to have some guys drafted, and we're wishing them well for the NFL career. Again, there's a lot of guys here who I think are slept on, and I think they're going to have really, really productive careers at the next level. So again, we're rooting for them. We're going to have more videos talking about the NFL Draft, and we'll have a wrap-up video, of course, when it's all said and done about Nebraska players and their team they fall with, and if that's a good fit for their NFL future. So again, let me know what you think about this down below. Maybe if you disagree with me, you think somebody has a better shot than what I'm projecting. Everything, let me know down below. But as always, folks, please hit the like button and subscribe. Go Big Red, go Matt Rhule, and see you in the next one.